You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Hello and welcome to the 602 Club, the local watering hole for all things geeky. And I am just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing. And with me, as she is always, Mrs. One-Up herself, Christy Morris.
Yeah, I was here before it was cool, and I do it the old-fashioned way, and I change my hair color every week, so I hope that's okay.
That's okay. I have vegan powers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I can defeat anyone.
I thought it was 3 strikes and you were out, though.
What? Oh, dang it. Oh, man. Well, we're going to have so much fun this week as we talk about the 10th anniversary of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And this is, I mean, it can't believe it's been 10 years since this movie first came out. And so make sure, though, before we dive into the show, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere podcasts can be had. Give us a star rating and review if you're over on Apple Podcasts. It really does help the show grow. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM or on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. There's a listeners-only discussion group on Facebook called the Babel Conference. You can join and talk to listeners from all over the world. Trek.fm, where you can also go to the contact section and send Christy and I an email. And really want to say a huge thank you to our associate producers here, Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, Ryan Maillet, and Daniel Noah. Really appreciate them supporting the show through Patreon. And you can go over to patreon.com/TrekFM, see how you can be part of our team. It takes a lot to put this network on each and every week, and we definitely need your support. And so, again, patreon.com is the place where you can give a little bit every month and make sure that all of the shows keep coming to you here on the network. And we got some great changes in store for you recently, too. So much happening here. Again, that's patreon.com/TrekFM. Christy, this wasn't something that I had put on the outline, but I was really interested to see because I wondered, obviously this is a comic book movie in the sense that it is based off a comic book. And and it was a pretty popular comic book by the time that the movie was going to get made already. And so I was wondering, is this a comic book that you read before the movie at all, or did you read it after the movie at all?
Interesting question, because usually I was the person that would read the source material before seeing the film adaptation of something, but I just never got around to either one, to either reading it or to watching the movie until the last couple of years. Which is funny for me because I don't know about you, but especially around the time of like 2007 when Juno came out, I was a pretty big Michael Cera fan at the time, like a lot of people were. What about you?
Yeah, I've still actually never read the comic, and part of that, not because I wouldn't want to or anything, I just have never gotten around to it. But, I like you, I was a huge Michael Cera fan, and, with Juno, and of course, Arrested Development, and then he would go on and be in Superbad and all those kind of things. He's such a funny actor, and so absolutely this movie, captured my attention. And it, and I worked at Barnes & Noble, so I'd seen the comic and everything. I was well aware of its kind of like manga style. But, it's by a Canadian author. So, it's very funny to also see kind of a manga type comic, not coming from, one of the Asian countries like Japan, where manga is so huge. And so, but no, I never got a chance to get to read the comic, and I would like to, especially after learning that, he hadn't even completed the sixth, the author, Bryan Lee O'Malley, he hadn't actually completed his sixth volume when they were doing the movie, and he had kind of given some notes on that. So it would be really interesting to see how it compares and how much they brought in, which speaking of adapting the comic, I thought was really interesting. I was doing a lot of reading, just the background of this, and I was really impressed by how much the artist and creator of Scott Pilgrim was involved in the making of the movie, which may be one of the reasons I think that it just turns out so well. I mean, and I think obviously you put him with Edgar Wright, who is known for being a very energetic and I would say fascinating director, willing to try and do things that are very different. You know, I mean, he had done Shaun of the Dead, and you know, he would do Hot Fuzz and those type of movies, you know. So great films, but, you know, again, kind of very having their own unique style. And I think you put these two guys together and you found the perfect people then to help adapt this to the screen.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, in particular about Wright's style, because man, when I discovered Hot Fuzz, which was around the time that this came out, was the first time I had seen it, it was like mind blown. Just so different, and really enjoying that director style, and going for kind of a risky way of filming something. And so that's what I really felt here too, because they're going along with making it just like a comic book spread on a screen, you know, with the thought bubbles or the, you know, words appearing as the sound is happening on the screen. So I think that that makes it really interesting, and I'm glad that they kept it true to that manga style.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in the fact of it not shying away from the over-the-top nature of comics in general, and then not shying away from then the over-the-top nature of everything that, you know, O'Malley was pulling from, which is manga and, of course, video games. And so you put this together, it's a mixture of like a video game comic book movie all in one. And there's something really special about the fact that it never shies away from the absurdity. Like,
right.
It's just, and which is what makes it so perfect, that it's like absurdly glorious as a film because of that. You know, it has a style that's all its own. And, you know, I'm hard pressed to think of any other comic book movie, honestly, that takes this much risk, other than possibly Into the Spider-Verse, where they really embrace the idea of, we're trying to make a comic book type movie feel like you're actually in a comic book. And then, of course, on top of that, video game, too. They meld the two together with Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And I think, you know, there's just something so beautiful about them not pulling any punches in that respect. And I give them full credit for not trying to water it down whatsoever. And in some ways, just, again, they completely embrace the absurdity, which is what makes this film glorious.
Right, like even leaning into... It felt like to me in the first fight with one of the X's, sort of like a scene from Mortal Kombat. And then later they have Wallace say, finish him. And then the thing that really caught me off guard as well, my first watch through, was even throwing in the Seinfeld riff.
Yeah, yes.
You're like, wait, I know that noise. So yeah, it's definitely over the top, but that suits making something like a graphic novel or a manga or a comic into a visual moving picture, literally.
Yeah. I mean, and there is this wonderful kind of fantasy element to it all, where, you know, we're based in reality in the sense that we're filming in all of these locations and everything, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the same time, we're also not afraid to just give this movie this surrealist feeling as well. And so again, you're mixing all of these different like styles and genres, like the gritty, you know, Toronto winters with, the crazy surrealist comic book / video game action, and even the dream sequences and the fantasy sequences and stuff. It also kind of reminded me. I don't know if you ever watched Scrubs, but Scrubs did that a lot as well back at that time point and time period. And so, I think the thing that this movie does the best is that it never apologizes for being outlandish, and that's absolutely perfect.
Or being confusing about what's real and what's a dream sequence. Like, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just, like you said, you meld those together, which is really great. And I also kind of thought it was great too, you from the very beginning, the author of the comic is very involved with the script. He even contributes to lines and adding polish, and in fact, several of the lines from the script kind of would be later used in the Scott Pilgrim comics because of the process it took to make this movie. So it's interesting to see how art, not imitated other art, what they made the movie actually helped inform the comics later on too, even with some of the character designs. I think if I remember correctly, one of the reading things I saw was that one of Envy's outfits actually gets in the comic. So, just things like that I just thought were really cool, to where this movie feels really special in that way. Like they were willing to take the risk. And I think it's just not something that we see very often, especially in the comic book movie genre. And then when people take risks big time, they don't always pay off, and so, I think they took all the right risks here, and, I'll spoil it right in front. I think they all pay off beautifully.
Well, I heard it didn't pay off literally in the box office like they hoped it would.
No, it didn't. It didn't. And I guess I have a question for you then, as you've seen this movie more recently and then, we watched it again here. Why do you think that is? Do you feel like maybe this movie was just too different from the norm and people just weren't ready for it then? And that's why it kind of ends up becoming a cult classic?
I think that it's not as much that, because there had been some stuff to that point that was in this kind of arena as far as just being that outlandish. But I think that the one thing that makes it difficult for me every time I've watched it is that it comes across generally with the tone that the creator was an angry person. Like, I get that there's these really shining, nice plot moments, but it just feels like overall, and you can tell me if you felt differently, but like with the dialogue, and some of the way that they're framing the character feelings overall, like even in spite of the situation, that it just feels very negative, like the, sort of everything that would have supported the grunge movement and being like that hipster kind of person and everything. It just like, I did everything better than the popular crowd and I'm annoyed by all of this, and Yeah, I think that's really interesting a string to pull on, because in some ways, you mentioned they even pull on the Seinfeld riff music, and that's Seinfeld to a T, right? Like, everybody is this kind of deplorable character, and yet people enjoyed watching them in some ways, I think, because they could get that side of them out without having to actually be like that. Yeah.
Or admit that they were like that. And so, but as an overall framing for a movie, maybe audiences just weren't like into that. I don't know. It's fascinating because it got good reviews. It wasn't like it's one of those things where the movie didn't get good reviews but then became a cult classic later. You know, and so I don't really honestly know what it is about the movie that people wouldn't respond to. I do think that people might not have been ready for the more artistic nature of this film at the time. You know, this film definitely is a more artistic, has more artistic sensibilities in its editing, and again, when we talked about it embracing kind of the fantasy or surrealist moments, and not necessarily differentiating those from, you know, reality, quote unquote, in the film, that it's all just a part of this strange, weird world where video game comic book world is actually real life almost, you know?
Right, it all bleeds together.
Right. And I think, you know, I'm trying to think, you know, when this movie came out, I can't really recall other films that had really gone this deep into that idea. I do think that's a valid point when you compare it with being similar to Into the Spider-Verse, because that is something that now I'm going, oh yeah, it definitely, because that one really pushed the envelope of how you can bring a comic book to life on a movie screen. And obviously when this came out, it was way prior to Spider-Verse. So I think that's part of it. Just for me, it felt like that wasn't possibly as big of a reason for the numbers to be bad as it possibly just feeling like a negative experience. Yeah, you know, I don't know. And it's interesting, too, because at this point, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was really, you know, just getting started to, we're in the very early stages of all of that, you know, so I don't think as well comic book movies had really had their resurgence. Obviously, the Dark Knight trilogy is happening during this time period, but there's something, again, I think there's just something about this that's not quite, you know, people had been going to see, like, the X-Men movies at that point and kind of expecting one thing from comic book movies, which is almost, you know, comic book movies at that point were very, like, grounded, you know, like the X-Men movies and then the Dark Knight movies after that really kind of took on this whole idea of realism in the comic book movies, which is kind of funny since they're about comic book characters could never exist in the real world. Whereas this movie takes the complete opposite view of that, which is, no, we're going to make a movie that lives up to everything you read in the comic book, which is basically this is a video game comic book world. There's no reality really to this in the traditional sense. So, and I think it's something to where it makes sense then that this movie has become more and more popular as we've got further into comic book movies kind of getting more into the surrealist nature. I mean, when you think about the weird, crazy stuff you do in like a Guardians movie, or even, you know, what we got in Spider-Verse, that kind of stuff where people are really starting to like play again with this idea of what it is. So yeah, that's good. That's a good thought. I wanted to ask you too, because the film had an original ending that was written for the movie, which was that Scott was going to get back together with Knives. And then the author of the comic book thought that this ending would kind of dilute Knives' character. And so the final book in the series was going to have Scott and Ramona get back together. And so a new ending was filmed to match the books, and that's the ending even Wright says he likes better. So what do you think about that idea? Would you have liked it if that had been the ending of the movie?
Yeah, I would have liked it better if he ended up with Knives, because the thing is, it ends up feeling like Knives is the one that always gets the short end of the stick if he ends up with Ramona, when she literally never did anything to deserve that. And so it comes across much more positively for Scott if he realizes what he did to hurt Knives, and that maybe he was also chasing the wrong person for him and does end up back with Knives. I think that would have been a stronger ending and a more positive way to wrap up Scott as a character.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I like the ending that's in the movie, and partly is just because I'm always a little bothered that he's dating a 17-year-old, which is illegal.
And I mean, you definitely get the vibe in the beginning that, like, it's, you know, that totally one-sided, needy relationship.
Right. Yeah, and
no
I
one
felt
likes.
like, right, and I kind of, so, you know, I can see then what the author is actually saying is that he felt like it would dilute Knives' character because it's almost like she's outgrown that reason that she was with Scott in the first place, which is that, you know, he's older and he's cooler, she thinks, and what she's been able to see is that he's just another person like her. He's not any cooler than she is, and that, you know, so there's growth for both of them because, you know, he gets to play out the whole moment of realizing what he's done to both of them. You know, so I see both sides, and so I like this better, but I could understand how that other side could actually work too. And I'm glad that the actress, you know, Ellen Wong, actually liked this ending better too. You know, if she's happier with it for her character, then I think that's great. You know, many times that doesn't get to happen for, you know, an actress to necessarily always be completely happy with where their you know, character goes. I'm pretty sure see Daisy Ridley. Yeah. This, I think, at least that part makes me happy. So,
how did you feel about the names, though?
Of the characters? Like,
yes.
Being like
Knives and Envy.
Yeah. It's funny because, you know, all of the names, there's a lot of them that are kind of classic comic book character names. You know, like his friend is Wallace Wells. Chris Evans is Lucas Lee. You know, so you have that alliteration, which is funny. And yeah, it's interesting, the names of the, you know, like Envy. And
well, and like when you see Natalie's name spelled out, you're like, oh, it could also be like the letter N and the letter V, because her name is Natalie V. Adams. But calling her Envy, you get why.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that there's a lot of cleverness, and that's part of the thing that makes this movie. And I'm sure the comic books actually have a lot of charm. Is there is a lot of thought, I think, put into, you know, the whole thing. And I think part of that to me was learning just about how important just the setting of this film is, and the setting of the comic book world as well, which is in Toronto, and the fact that Wright lived in Toronto for a year to get all of this just right so that they would be using all of the same places. Like, him and the artist literally written around, and where he couldn't remember necessarily, they were taking like the comic book and like, okay, was this it? Like, trying to get everything just right. And I think that that's really important, because there's nothing special about the place we're in the sense of, like, it doesn't look fantastic. It just looks pretty normal.
Yeah.
Everyday, suburban, slight city feel to it. But the setting is so important for the look and the feel of the movie, which is, it's very based in the music scene that was happening in Canada with all of these different bands, you know, that were playing at that point. You know, even some of them work on the film. You know, some of the big ones, like you get Radiohead, you get Beck, you know, you get other bands like that. And so everything is about creating this milieu that this is in. Like you were talking about, it's that kind of grunge, hipster, you know, all of that put into a blender. And I think that's one of the things that really actually accentuates the movie and its boringness, is the fact that all of these places, none of them look particularly exciting or enticing to be in, except for the one where they have the big battle with Chris Evans. That's a cool set.
The Chaos Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really the setting here, and for them to spend so much time to get it right. And they even rebuilt some of the sets for the stages where they're playing music that don't exist anymore. They rebuilt them from photos so that they would be authentic to the type of places these bands will be playing in. So like they do so much work there, but it truly pays off.
And I will say that was the best part of it for me, was the music and the vibe of the venues where the band is playing, or the living room where they're playing, because that was reminding me of my freshman year in college, when that was all I did, was go to concerts and hang out with my musician friends and stuff like that in these like terrible places, like a half pipe in an indoor skate park. So
yeah,
it reminded me fondly of those days when I went to crappy venues, to crappy concerts.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the setting really, again, it does such a great job with, as we're talking about too, with the look and the feel of the movie, because they ground it in this kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say grungy place, but it does kind of feel like, it's snowy, it's dirty. It doesn't feel like the nicest place in the world, in the sense that they're playing, like you said, in all of these kind of rundown venues, and people aren't living in immaculate homes. I mean,
yeah, their bed
Scott's
is on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. So I think all of that plays into then when they kind of burst out into their video game type scenes. It brings those to life even more, because it's a complete juxtaposition with everything that you've been shown elsewhere in the movie.
Yeah, and that was nice to have that juxtaposition there, because otherwise, like you said, it's very drab. There's not a lot of furniture. They're shopping at Goodwill and going to the CD store, which who does that anymore?
Not many people.
So, yeah, it does make it more exciting.
The other thing I think about this movie that makes it so special is just the amount of people that are in this movie before they really hit it big.
Yeah.
We have, Michael Cera at this point actually is probably one of the most well-known people in the cast because of what he had going on with Arrested Development.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating that we were watching this and we were finishing it up tonight, and my wife was like, he's just one of my favorites because his comedic timing is just so good. And he's so great at playing the uber awkward but lovable goofball, who doesn't quite know what to say, but he really is trying, and he's not trying to be a bad guy, or he's just trying to be a guy. Honestly, he's just trying to make it, and he's so perfect for this role. And I think Wright was absolutely right in seeing in his mind that Scott Pilgrim was always Michael Cera to him.
Yeah, I think that casting was spot on, especially with him. The one thing that kind of bugs me is, especially now after seeing Aubrey Plaza and other things, she's a very one-note actress to me. So it was just kind of, oh, well, there's Aubrey Plaza being Aubrey Plaza again. But, otherwise, like, generally, I thought Michael Cera was perfect casting choice for Scott. I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead is awesome, period. And then she was great for this role. And I liked Kieran Culkin, actually, since I saw him in Saved.
Yeah, he's just so funny in this role. And I think one of the things that they did absolutely perfectly with the cast is the fact that you have all of these great people who can imbibe their roles perfectly. Again, this is way before Aubrey Plaza hits it big with Parks and Rec or anything like that. And so, but she is completely the character in perfection. Like, she is Julie Powers, and just that person who's just trying to be the cool person by association, you know. And Anna Kendrick completely just kind of being her classic, like, narcissistic self as well. And, you know, you put that with, like, somebody like Brie Larson, who hadn't been big yet, really Alison Pill, who hadn't really hit it, you know, huge. You know, the only other person in here who is a kind of a name is, like, Brandon Routh, because he was Superman. So.
And Chris Evans.
Yeah, Chris Evans, too. Yeah. I mean, he had been in Fantastic Four. I mean, he wasn't Captain America yet. So, I mean, his comic book rep wasn't great because, well, he was in Fantastic Four.
Right.
So, you know.
But hey, he was still hot.
It's true. It's very true. But I think that's the thing that they found all of these incredible people, and what's amazing is that it is a snapshot of all of them before most of them are huge.
Right.
And yet they're perfectly cast in their roles, and I think that's what makes this movie work so well, you know, is that they're everything the characters need to be, and more, even though some of them have very little screen time. And I think that's a testament to the writing, but it's also a testament to the casting of them casting the absolute right people so that you immediately kind of know who these characters are, even before, you know, you really get to see them on screen. And then once you do, they embody those characters in a way that leaves no question in your mind as to who this character is supposed to be in this film.
Right, like you can read from their facial expression and their wardrobe and the way that their, you know, body language is moving, exactly what they're feeling in that moment, or, you know, what their character is like. I really think that the standout to me, aside from the two main characters of Scott and Ramona, is Brandon Routh.
Yeah, I think, you know, he does such a good job with playing Todd Ingram and the whole, like, vegan thing, which the fact that they're making fun of vegans in that way, because, like, that's one of the jokes about a vegan is that you'll know that they're a vegan within 5 minutes of meeting them.
Right, because they'll say it a million times.
Exactly. And they'll treat you like they're some sort of god compared to you, which, again, is hilarious, that whole thing. I love that. I also love that they make a joke about it being science, about why, you know, he has these powers, but then he doesn't actually know what's vegan and what's not vegan, really. Right. And the vegan police come and take his vegan card. Yeah. Oh, man. So good. And then, you know, I love that Mae Whitman had been in, you know, she had actually been in Arrested Development with Michael Cera and played his girlfriend for a few episodes with Anne, which is hilarious. And then, you know, Jason Schwartzman is so good at playing the swarmy, like, nasty, villainy type of guy who thinks he's really, really cool, but really he's just kind of a turd, you know? Like, yeah. Again, like, this cast is just so great. Like, and it's the thing that if any one of these people wasn't right, they would have really hurt the movie. You know? Like, I don't feel like there's anyone in the film where I'm like, oh, they're not very good.
I don't know. For the most part, I didn't. But, I mean, you and I both kind of feel the same about Brie Larson. Don't really love her.
She's good in this role, I think. I mean, you know, she doesn't have a big role, but I think she does a pretty good job of playing the type of girl that would leave Scott for the record deal. Yeah. You know, and to be famous.
It just sounded like it was someone else's voice, I guess is what was weird to me. It's
actually her, I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. It sounded too high-pitched.
She can actually sing. So, she sings on Instagram. She'll play the guitar and sing. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I've also, she was really good in a movie called The Spectacular Now.
Okay, I
which
haven't
is
seen that one.
fantastic movie. Love that film. She's very good in that. So she can be a great actress. And, of course, she won an Oscar for Room, and she was very good in that, too. So I think she has a specific range, and she can do it excellently. I think here she does everything she's asked to do, and she does it well, and I never, it never bothers me. And it's just honestly more funny to go back and realize, that's Brie Larson before she was, and a name people knew. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I would definitely say overall good, strong casting. I feel like everyone's characters really work well together and then get across those things like you were saying about Schwartzman playing the Seventh X. I think that he does a great job of getting across that situation that sometimes you may have experienced in a relationship where someone just has a hold over you and you don't know why. So it was interesting to see them play that out on screen and then how to get past it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It's not even something that's on the outline, but I think that's a really good point, and it was something I was kind of thinking of as well when I was finishing the movie, was just that idea, because there are many times to which many of us have found ourselves in relationships. We kind of we've ended up again with a person that is not right for us and is not really good for us, and yet we can't keep from going back to them. And I like that this movie plays that out. I mean, they make a joke of it that he literally is inside her head.
Right, with a chip.
The chip. But there's something to that, and as well as making it a tangible thing that we can kind of see, and how the only thing that can break that is somebody being real and vulnerable and loving towards you in a way that is able to destroy that hold finally. Because they see you for who you truly are and love you for who you are. And that's kind of, I feel like, the point of that whole section of the story with Ramona specifically is that, Scott has been fighting for her this whole time, and he really does like her and lesbians her, and I think there's something there's something specifically to that the movie gets to, that's usually what kind of breaks that cycle for you, is you can finally see it for what it is in a way that you could never before, but that's because you're having the whole other experience on the good side, finally.
Yeah.
And when you put them in juxtaposition together again, you're like, well, this one's stupid. Why? So...
Well, and that they pointed out that the whole time Scott didn't have any self-respect.
Yeah.
That he was being the same way that Knives was about him, but now it's him toward Ramona, and he needed to stop and say, I need to have some self-respect and realize that if she doesn't want to be with me, that maybe I'm not going to die without her.
Right. Well, and that self-respect of it's not just about me fighting for her, it's about me fighting for me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like that a lot. And I think that really goes into something that I was thinking big time about this movie, and Ramona calls it out, and she tells Scott, look, we all have our baggage, know? And I thought it's so interesting to see this movie really talk about the baggage that we carry from previous relationships, but the damage that we can really do to one another, especially when we kind of use our relationships for selfish purposes. And we see a lot of the stories that Ramona tells, she's using these guys for very selfish purposes. But
every time.
Every time. And then we see that same thing play out on the guy's side with Scott and the way he's dealing with Knives. It's kind of a selfish purpose of he's just trying to get over envy. And, not only that, but Knives is kind of very safe. She worships him. She thinks he's, all that. And that's not that's not a very healthy place to be either. And so I really thought that the fact that we're going to talk about the idea of baggage and the way that this all gets played out in the subsequent relationships and then on how that impacts the relationships we're in next, and can sometimes have a detrimental impact on them because we never really truly get over these things, was fascinating, and it's a great, to me, it's like, this is a great message for anybody watching this movie, from high school on, because this is something that we kind of get into the cycle of with as humans, and it really hurts all of us.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, you and I are so on the same page with that in particular. That was the thing that I took away from the movie more than any other point in the themes they explore, is that it's about how you let your past affect your present. And that, yes, we all have baggage because that's just life. Like, you're going to have experiences and that's going to make you become who you are in the future. But you can choose if you want those exes to affect your current relationship negatively, or if you want to let it go and realize you're with someone different.
Well, and how so many times it leads to the same thing if you don't. Like, all of Ramona's relationships end up with her dumping them, but it's because she kind of ends up in this same pattern with each one of them, and never finds a way to work out what it is that's causing that. And that's the thing, again, at the end of the movie, when they have the big fight and all of them, Scott's coming to the, Scott learns the power of love. First he realizes that he actually loves her, so there's a move in emotion. There's a move in a realization and an understanding of the actual emotion happening inside of him. But then the next one is self-respect, and all of these things have to be had in a relationship to actually make it work well, because if you don't have self-respect in a relationship, you're just going to end up being codependent.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be in that type of relationship because it's never going to be healthy, and you always end up, in a bad place with that. So, like, the fact that there's like this much depth in this type of movie fascinates me, because it really is kind of deconstructing a lot of things that make relationships not work. And part of that is, and I think we see this in every single part of this movie, and you were kind of touching about it earlier, everybody's kind of a dick in this movie. Everybody's treating each other in a way that is we're kind of using each other. And it's not until the very end where Scott not only learns self-respect, but like, he apologizes to everybody. He apologizes to his band. He's like, you guys are better without me. He's like, young Neil, you now should be known as Neil. He apologizes to Kim finally for the way that he's treated her all of these years. He apologizes to both Knives and Ramona for cheating on both of them and treating both of them badly. And all of those things, it's like, it's so beautiful. And really, it kind of comes down to the other thing I saw was like, this movie is all about taking responsibility for our actions and personal responsibility for how we impact not only our life, but the lives around us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you see that, like you said, with Ramona, where she every time was using somebody and not dealing with why she felt that way, and then just disappearing and moving on to the next one and starting at the beginning again and having the same problem over and over again. And so, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely that. It's that you have to examine yourself and say, what do I need to fix so that I'm not going to keep making the same mistakes?
And I think one of the things that we kind of see as well, and I appreciate this whole idea of responsibility, is that a lot of what we, I think, kind of see in our culture, especially for men, they never transition from being a boy to a man, because part of that growing up process is taking responsibility for your actions and not just blaming other people. And beforehand, you see Scott kind of using the ability to just kind of blame others for what happened instead of, again, taking that responsibility on himself. And I think that him being able to transition then from boyhood to manhood is really kind of special in this movie. And I feel like it's kind of in a lot of ways, I feel like some of what this movie is saying with talking about relationships and responsibility and this kind of stuff, it almost feels countercultural to what we see a lot of times in our entertainment these days, where everybody's either just making an excuse or treating each other badly and they get away with it, and we applaud them for doing so. And here, the whole movie is about, no, these people coming to grips with who they are. And, I thought that the whole responsibility thing really comes down to, Scott facing Mega Scott, which,
right.
And instead of fighting, they talk it out in the end. And part of that, it kind of showed me that that's about the responsibility towards that self-respect of dealing with the issues that you have by having some sort of maybe therapy. Because what really in reality is playing out between Scott and Mega Scott is Scott dealing with his own inner demons.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to do that is to go talk to somebody to help, a therapist, and a good therapist to help you work through some of those things so that you can move past them. Mm-hmm. And so to me, even though it's not explicit, I think that undertone there is really important.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because you obviously think that in the moment he's going to have a knockdown, drag out karate fight with the other version of himself, and then they end up talking. I think that's definitely what they're alluding to having happened, and that they're showing this is the way that adults should deal with their inner demons and not avoiding them or avoiding responsibility.
So what you're saying is this is the way. Yeah, it's so interesting, and so I don't know, watching through this movie again, I was just reminded of why I like it so much. And so I'm really interested for you, especially since this is a movie that you hadn't seen as much until more recently, where this kind of falls for you ratings wise.
So it definitely felt like I took away a lot more than I thought I would from it. And that especially with these big themes like the relationship baggage and the dealing with responsibility and things like that, was really interesting to get from a comic book or manga based movie. I think that, like I said, the major thing that hurt it to me was that feeling of it being people that are too cool for school kind of feeling, or really negative. And maybe that comes from them all being just kind of characters that are using people as well. But that was the one thing that kind of bothered me and made me feel sometimes like the movie dragged, was that negativity. So I knock it down a little for that, and I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. But that I still enjoy it overall, and think that it's got more pluses than minuses for me.
Yeah, it was really interesting rewatching this one, because I found that I think I just love it more than I thought I did. And part of that, I think, was this movie is just, it's so inventive, and it doesn't apologize for any part of it. It just is what it is unabashedly. And I think there's a real beauty to that in the fact that the artistry and creativity of the thought process of this author really came to screen. And I think Wright was the absolute best person to make that happen. And part of that is because of his own creativity. I mean, if you watch his movie Baby Driver, and the way he meticulously creates scenes so that the beats of the music that will be playing as the songs actually match the actions of what's happening on screen. I mean, this is how meticulous he is as a director. And he truly is consciously, I think, trying to create art, not just a goofy film. He's really trying to push the envelope in fun, cool, inventive, crazy ways like that. So I just really, every time I watch the movie, it grows on me more. And I'm with you in that I feel like the movie is very cynical throughout most of it, but I feel like it continues, the heart of it kind of grows each movement of the film until the very end, where it's the heart of the Grinch grew 3 sizes that day. And everybody ends up in a much more healthy and emotionally stable place. than they were, and a kinder place. Like, everybody's a much kinder person at the very end of this movie than they were at the beginning, which I think is great too. And so, and part of that is the kind of, in many ways, the rejection of all the things that they thought were going to be important to them. Like, you know, being a rock star was not important. Being, you know, all of that stuff, you know, having the right boyfriend or the right girlfriend or any of those things, like, the lessons they learn help them see what the things that are really important. And then on top of that, that in the end, it's the people around us that are important and how we treat them.
Yeah.
So, and at least the three characters that we care about, I think, the most in the film, which are Knives and Ramona and Scott, are all the ones who learn those lessons and kind of come away from the film much better people than when the movie started, which is a nice place to end. And so I'm hard-pressed to not give this 5 stars, but I'll give it 4.5 out of 5 because it's just continued to grow on me every time I've seen it. And yeah, I love it. So before we get out of here, though, Christy, it's time, as always, for some recommendations.
Oh, I've got a good one this time. So I have been watching some of the more recent Netflix original series, and actually one that I ran across by accident and said, that's kind of a cute name. I wonder what this is about. I ended up really, really getting emotionally invested in, and now I can't wait for season 2. I recommend watching Never Have I Ever on Netflix, which is a coming of age story. It's relatable because it's something that obviously we all go through with the puberty and early high school era in our lives, and trying to not only become more mature in general, but then dealing with the, you know, dating and everything, and then parents' expectations. But the main character is actually an Indian girl, and her family life is a bit difficult. I'm not going to tell you why. I'm not going to spoil it. But she's dealing with some really tough stuff for being a freshman in high school, and then also just wants to be considered normal. And so it's really irreverent and funny, but then also has that emotional depth to it. So I really recommend watching Never Have I Ever on Netflix.
Nice. Once we get moved, I might have some more time for watching shows. It's been so crazy for us. But
yeah, I'm sure.
I did get a chance to read a brand new Star Wars book that we're actually going to be covering here. Not the next week, because we're going to take it off because I'm moving. But the next week, we're coming back, and I recommend that you read Poe Dameron Freefall. And I'm not going to tell you my rating or why you should read it or anything, but I do think, and I don't say this about every Star Wars book, I think this one is worth reading, and you're going to want to have read it so you can listen to Christy and I break it down, because it's going to be a lot of fun.
So you would say you were free falling?
Yes. Because I'm free.
I couldn't help
Absolutely. Great pull. Glad you went there.
You're welcome.
Normally, I'm the one who has to sing, so that's awesome. I know I choose the right co-host for a reason. So, Christy, when you're not getting down with Sex Bomb, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and for now still TikTok at Bespin Bell. And I do a couple of other shows. I do an awesome show with my friend Teresa Delgado called Sabers and Spells. And I'm hoping maybe she'll let me cover Umbrella Academy Season 2. I'm going to make her watch it. Just wait and see. And then I also do a show called Planet Leia on the Fantatrax network, where it's 5 women from around the world covering Star Wars.
Awesome. Well, you can find me here on the network doing The Orb with Chris Jones. When we get a chance, we talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'll be back on Literary Trek soon, so you can check that out. I'm also doing 2 shows on the Nerd Party Network. One is called Owlpost. I'm doing that with Drea Kaufman. We're talking about Harry Potter each and every week. We're going one chapter at a time, and we are in the Deathly Hallows, and it is getting real, folks. Also doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, as we're talking about Star Wars each and every week. We have a blast just picking out something we've been thinking about in Star Wars every week and hanging out and talking about it. So, so find me on all of those shows. But you know what? Thank you so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?